Thank you all for the terrific questions in the comments of my other videos, and thank you for watching anyway. Sometimes a comment will send me on a mission that creates an entire new segment, and this is one of those. In this case, I was asked, how do we do this shot of Bill, the Cyberman, and the mirror from The Dr. Falls? While you're pondering that, this sparked all kinds of homework, early scripts, rushes for the scenes, early edits, and even a charming gag reel moment that I had completely forgotten about. I'll show that off in a bit. Yes, I'm a terrible tease. And to make that worse, before we get into the good stuff here, let me set the stage about these days that we were filming in the barn and the whole sequence in general. I remember these days in the barn were really stressful. First of all, we were on location, and that always makes things more complicated. Weather, light changes, travel time, blah, 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 blah. Another stressor was exactly that these transition shots from Bill to the cyber were difficult, and therefore were going to be more time consuming. So I went back and looked at the schedules, and we only had a day and a half to shoot all the barn sequences. And we were also working on children's hours because of the kid, which of course are shorter than adult hours. On top of that, we were in this 14th century barn. Well, I think it was a 14th century barn. Maybe it was older. Somehow my memory is that it was a 14th century barn. So it was a listed building. So we were quite limited in what equipment we could bring in, and certainly we couldn't hang any lights. So the director of photography, Ashley Rowe, did a stunning job with lighting instruments outside the windows. Sometimes even the sun cooperated. One of the reasons the Bill cyber scene was so complicated was that we had to shoot it with Bill, and then we had to do it again with the cyber, played by Liam. Of course, Stephen Moffat was completely specific in the script of when he wanted to reveal that Bill was the cyber. I mean, that's the main plot point. He also specified generally where he wanted cyber shots, but once we had the reveal, it was faster to run the whole take with Liam, replicating Bill's actions. This was easier than breaking the scene into a lot of parts, and faster, and it had the added bonus of us having extra footage in the editing, which is never a bad thing. But still, it was extra work, and some of these takes were quite long, and Liam had to learn all the choreography. It took extra time. The minute you add cyber shadows or transitions or kids or even where is the sun, or any of the infinite variables on the location shoot day, time disappears, because time is non-linear and it runs faster on shoot days. It steals from your ambitious shots and plans. All right, enough of that ethereal stuff. Let's look at the easier shot. So in the script it says, Bill, do you remember what they did to you? Bill, nothing. Look at me. I'm fine. The doctor, eloquent silence. I'm fine. She puts her hand to her face for confirmation. We cut close on her fingers as they make contact, but in the close shot, her fingers are the cyber fingers, and her face is the sickly white of cyber flesh. She snatches her hand away. What was that? And in the wider shot, she's Bill again.
I'm fine!
So you can see that I didn't shoot it exactly as Stephen had scripted. I wanted it all to play in one shot, so we simply had the Cyberman next to Bill, and we panned away long enough for Pearl to slip out of frame and him to slip into it. Kind of the cheapest trade over in the book. It's interesting to take a look at the rushes.
Okay.
I'm fine!
A really bad example of why it didn't work, and then here's how we refined it.
Action.
I'm fine!
One more time.
I'm fine!
Kind of adorable. I think it was worth the effort, and I think it has a subtle effect that's more dramatic than edits. Maybe not. Which brings us to the more difficult version. And remember, when I talk about the more difficult versions, anything is doable if you have the time and money, which we never had either. Turns the square of wood over, reveals it to be a mirror. She stares at herself. The shot is angled so we can't see Bill's reflection, and now we track around, and we see a cyber staring back from the mirror. Now from Alet's POV, a huge Cyberman, Bill as she truly is, stands in the barn, staring at herself in the mirror. There's several thoughts on this. When I read it, I thought we could probably do a quick switch like we did in the shot that I just showed. But there were questions about which hands we would see when, and we needed the cyber to be holding the mirror in the end. On the day, we just couldn't get the angles to work. The cyber was too bulky and we couldn't get the hands in time. The frames became very awkward. But let me tell you, discovering your simple version of a shot is not going to work in the middle of a shooting day is a hair-on-fire emergency. So we all quickly regrouped, meaning me, the wonderful camera operator Mark McCoy, the great DP Ashley Rowe, and the innovative problem-solving producer Peter Bennett. We had about 12 seconds to come up with a new plan. There was a simple solution. We just put an edit in the material. Would that have killed everything? Well, of course not. Stephen had put an edit in the script, but that felt like giving up. A green screen in the mirror was also an idea, but it didn't take into consideration the cyber hand. So we quickly decided that we could do a 2-pass shot, shooting all the material with Bill, and then replicating it with the Cyberman, and then do a sort of fudge moving morph to attach the 2 shots together. Which of course you'll hear me say more than once that if we had had motion control, it would have been seamless, but we weren't planning to do it, we didn't have it, and it was too expensive. This was a last-minute crisis. Here's an example of the 2 passes. When you look at the rushes, you'll see that we only did this one take. But within that take, we went forward and backward, giving us several options as how to knit it together. Mark McCoy did something interesting, which is basically, in order to get the muscle memory of the shot, we moved the cyber in when we were locked off, and then went back and forth to get the best replication that he felt comfortable with. One other thing that we did to make it all work was that we put the mirror on a stand, so it absolutely was rock solid. So the mirror was our defined point, and hats off to Mark McCoy for being a motion control operator when that is not what human beings do. Little details like this, the experience of the operator, the safety nets, all add up to why these things can work. They don't always, but smart, experienced, and keen crew, which is Doctor Who by definition, are the best. Here's how we stitched them together in the edit, which was done ultimately by a VFX company. Will Oswald told me that he doesn't have a traumatic memory of how hard it was to do the match in editorial. That's kind of how we judge how we remember things. Were they super problematic if we remember things with trauma? If we barely remember them, then they worked. One thing I did discover in the investigation was an early draft of the script, the doctor, how to explain this terrible thing. His eyes flick to a tractor sitting at the back of the barn. The doctor, that tractor over there. Bill, yeah. The doctor, go over to it. Bill, why? The doctor, please. Bill goes to the tractor. Put your hand under the wheel arch and get a good grip. She places her hand as instructed. Lift it up. Sorry, what? Lift up the tractor. What do you mean I can't? And even as she protests, she simply lifts up the tractor, as if it weighed nothing at all. She stares at it in astonishment. Just very faintly, she can see her face reflected in the paintwork. A dim, distorted image of a Cyberman is looking back at her. Horror. And before she knows what she's doing, she winds back her arm and throws. The tractor crashes straight through the wall of the barn. It sure would have been cool to throw that tractor through the barn. And why was it cut out? Well, money, obviously. It was enough that we had a fake plug in the doorway that we were able to blow out. That was a big deal too, and that was more our speed. Well, that's a touch of information about the sequence. My muscle memory was that all the days were chock full and that they were quite stressful. Also, I remember how brilliant Ashley Rowe was in terms of making it look so beautiful, even when we were in serious mud pits. And also because we were on location, we had a caterer and they ran out of utensils. Really? See, that's the kind of traumas that we remember. Here's a picture of Ashley eating his cake with a knife. Well, at least we had cake. Enough for this session. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe. Share the love. Thanks.